It's my pleasure and honor to welcome all of you here to this eBaithak on behalf of Center for Civil Society. Center for Civil Society is a public policy think tank based out of New Delhi, which works on education, livelihood, and governance. We, on behalf of the Policy Training and Outreach Department of Center for Civil Society, would like to welcome you here and hope that it will be a very fruitful conversation for all of you. Dhruv, if you could just go ahead and introduce Mr. Jerry so we can begin with it right away.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the speaker of today's eBaithak. It's always a pleasure to have him here with us. Please welcome Mr. Jerry Johnson. Jerry is a professional strategist. He's a TEDx speaker and creator, and he's a DFAS fellow. Jerry has had more than 15 years of experience across the breadth of brand communication and marketing, including digital marketing, event management, campaign execution, positioning strategy, and social media marketing. He's a published writer under HarperCollins India, and he's been a guest speaker at the Parliament of World Religions in Toronto, at the Jaipur Literature Festival, at the Stockholm Cultural Festival, and TEDx Pune, just to name a few. Jerry has published articles and he's provided commentary on major mainstream news channels in India, including Times Now, CNN, IBN, and BBC World, on matters ranging from free speech to LGBTQ rights. And without any further ado, let's begin with the eBaithak. Over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dhruv. Thank you, Saurya. If I'm audible, my video is clear, then somebody just turn on your video and give me a thumbs up, or can just tell me if I'm all clear. Okay, good. I've got some brothers saying thumbs up. Thank you for inviting me to this session, and I hope I can be some value to all of you by the end of this. So I'll start by kind of just saying, why me? Why am I conducting this session for you, especially for a community of the part of the Girl Up network, and what's my connection with these issues? And I think by the end of our session together, I think what you can come out appreciating is that anyone, any person, any individual can speak for the rights of every other person. And that the emancipation of any one person is the emancipation of the rights of all. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is that by the end of our session, you should not come away thinking that this was a conversation about LGBTQ freedom and rights, about LGBTQ minority community and how they go through their struggles and how they, therefore need their equal rights protected and their freedom to be, their emancipation to be engendered. This conversation has to be about our own personal freedom, our own personal liberties. And all of us have a stake in this conversation. And I think that should be the takeaway from this session. But more specifically, I would like to say that, okay, my particular role here is that I am a gay man. So I was, I was born, or I remember being gay from my earliest memory. And my earliest memory was when I was in the second standard. And I remember as a second standard student, I remember writing in the back of my notebook, because the back of your notebook is the most secret place that you can imagine when you are that young. I remember writing the back of my notebook, I love Anoop. I even remember his name. So at such an early stage of my developmental growth, I still knew that I was attracted to a boy. Not a girl in my class, because I was in a co-ed school and I had girls as well, but I was attracted to this boy and I wrote his name down. So the idea is that there is something very innate and natural about how each of us are built. Each of us are built in a very unique, natural way that completely comes out and flourishes when you are very young, because you still don't know what it means to behave like someone else expects you to, because you still do not know what society wants out of you. So when you're very, very young, you are the most free in the expression that you put out. You write with freedom, you express with freedom, and you say things with freedom. And often for that case, a lot of children are very scary because they'll come and tell you the truth. And a lot of children can be very mean because what we perceive as mean is them just telling you the unvarnished truth about yourself and about themselves. So it goes back as far back as that, as childhood, that we are made in a very unique way, and then we grow up and we try to fit into our societies and fit into certain ideas of what we should be. The other reason that I'm here speaking with you and I'm having this session with you is because I happen to also write a book. I don't know if you can read it in reverse, but it's called I Am Divine, So Are You. And this book, I wrote this in collaboration with another very famous author, Devdutt Patnaik. And this book explores the stories that we were born in India over the history and over the centuries of our civilization. So over 5,000 years, which is how long our civilization has been around, the Indian subcontinental civilization, over 5,000 years, what are the kind of ideas, stories, philosophies we have heard, we have spoken about, we have written about, we have inherited? So this book explores that in a very simple and easy to understand, quick language. And it shows about how diverse the Indian subcontinental understanding of gender, sex, body, mind, all of these, it was so diverse. In fact, one of the earliest phrases in Indian history or in Indian philosophy is this one phrase called diversity is itself nature. The natural is itself diverse. Vikriti evam prakriti. It comes from the Rig Veda. So we have inherited a philosophy of deep appreciation of diversity, a deep comfort with diversity. Our gods, the many Hindi, if you're a Hindu and you believe in gods, you know your stories of your gods transitioning across binaries, transitioning across identities, transitioning and transgressing across expressions. And not just Hinduism, if you look at Jainism as well. So one of the earliest ideas of Jainism is the idea that there is a mind that is different from the body, that is different from the performance, that is different. So there are three elements to a person: mind, body, performance. So in modern gender studies, what would you call them? You would say sex, gender identity, and gender expression, right? So these are stories that we've inherited, we own, we have it as part of our history. So the conversation here has to be, what are the stories we have told ourselves and what are the stories we have accepted for ourselves without critical questioning? So it is a journey of discovery for each of you, not just for me and not about LGBTQ people. It is a journey of discovery for each of you. So if I can see some names, I can see an Anant Preet, I can see a Chavi, I can see a Gargi. All of you have to ask yourself, what did I grow up with believing and assuming? Do I accept it without critical thought? And is it okay for me? So that's the story. So given that, I am going to actually start with asking one question out of Soria. Soria, can you, in one or two sentences, encapsulate what is the real reason and purpose of this CCS Baitak here? Why have this audience chosen to attend this session on a Saturday evening at 5 p.m.? Why are we spending this 1.5 hour session together? What is the value that they hope to get?
Jerry, I think better than me answering, I think it'd be great if some of the audience members would like to answer. Why did they choose to sit and attend this?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted a consolidated response, but yes, if anybody wants to speak up on behalf of everyone else.
Is there anybody from the audience who
You
would
can
want
raise
to?
your virtual hand and then turn on your mic and speak.
And even if you want to say, why are you yourself attending here? Yeah, I see a hand. Shivani, please go ahead.
Hi, am I audible? All right. Okay, so since it's about gender equality, I have been a little concerned about how, my male friends are taking feminism as. So that was the major reason for me to actually join and learn how to make them understand, because I don't want to get into fights. And I understand their concern, because any time when, a community which has been oppressed, they come up, they are empowered, there is certain section which misuses it. And I'm not denying that there is a misuse of so many laws, but that does not mean the basic idea of feminism, which is to literally oppress patriarchy, which is also helping males, actually it's helping both the genders, right? So why don't we understand the larger part of it, and the reality of feminism, the true meaning of it, and rather than only questioning like, अरे उसको उसने पूछा, उसने तो कुछ भी नहीं बोला, और वो लड़की ने इतना ज्यादा उसे बोल दिया तो सब लड़के को डांटने लग गए. I mean, that feels really cheap to me. I'm sorry, but at the same time, I am literally reading rape news, reading marital rape happening, and little girls, little boys, and I mean, the idea of feminism is being ruined just because of this. And I really want to speak to those people and make them understand, because this is not what we, this is not the idea of feminism. This is not even the meaning of feminism, actually. It's equality, that's all. So how can we actually get that? I mean, good guys. It's like good guys not understanding the basic idea. That really affects me.
Thank you so much, Shivani, for being the first one to brave enough to speak and kickstart this conversation, because it has to be a conversation between us. Regarding a specific point, right? Your point about feminism and how can we communicate that to a lot of men, and how can we get allies to participate in the common project of emancipating and equalizing the genders and equalizing the sexes. See, I think step one has to be that let's, have more compassion to those who don't get it, and compassion to those who don't understand it. That's, I think, the step one. I mean, you just begin by saying that it's okay to not understand, because this field is so complex and this field is very diverse. And I think the step two is to say that let's not get hung up on labels. कि आप feminist नहीं हो, but you believe in all the feminine ideas of equality and liberation, but you don't like to call yourself a feminist. I'm fine with that. Let's talk about specifics. Let's talk about my actual day-to-day lived experience as a human being. Do I get the same access to opportunities? Do I get the same equal rights under the law? Am I treated the same way with respect and dignity? Then I don't care what you call yourself, whether you call yourself a feminist or whether you call yourself a trans, I don't know. Whatever you want to call yourself, you can label them. But the fundamental conversation has to be a compassionate, empathetic conversation about lived experiences. Is your reality in this world difficult to navigate? And when you come down to that, you will realize, as you said, Shivani, that there are a lot of men trapped under the oppressions of patriarchal system. And see, we think of patriarchy as only men oppressing women. And as you correctly said, patriarchy can be very oppressive to both, and patriarchy can be supported also by both. There are a lot of women who support ideas of patriarchy unwittingly and unknowingly, and so do men. And likewise, the oppression transfers in both sides and not just on women. Anyone else wants to put up their hand to kickstart this conversation? I also have a little bit of a quiz and an interaction that I want to start out with. But before I do that, anyone else wants to raise your hand and make a comment? Okay, so I don't think I'm having a very interactive audience. Is that just the way you are, people? I need you to be more interactive. We are on a virtual platform, so we can't get body languages and all that. So I don't get any kind of feedback from you. So if anyone wants to raise their hand and speak up, this is a good time to do that. Okay, let's start with some basics of the conversation about gender, sex, orientation. Are you able to see my screen, the screen that I've shared?
Yeah, Jerry, we can.
Okay. Can you see the code on top? Just use your cell phones, everybody, all 50 of you. Go to mentimeter.com or menti.com, www.menti.com, and use the code 4554 5297. If you want, I can also copy this link and paste it in the chat. Have you all gone to the site? Menti.com, and your code is 455 45297. Once you're there, you will be able to answer this question, and I'll be able to get a sense of the room and the room's understanding of various issues. Why am I not seeing any responses yet? Okay, there you go. Starting to see responses. Somebody has written intersectional. Okay, also I want to point out that all the contributions you make over here on this menti.com is entirely confidential. Even I will not be able to see who's writing what. So please feel free to be honest. Express yourself honestly on all the questions that I will ask over here. So we have 13 responses so far, and there are 50 of us, I think, on this call. There's only 19 responses. Okay, good. So I think we've gone beyond majorities now, 26 responses. I see some interesting, strange ones. I don't know if it's a misspelling, but boosexual, never heard of that term unless it's a new one that I'm not familiar with. There's economics. Whoever wrote economics, I wonder if you know any alphabetical spelling, LGBTQIA, how do you get economics out of that? So let's not try to be smart on this conversation. Let's try and be genuine and authentic. We are having a very serious, authentic and sensitive discussion here. So people writing economics as a full form of LGBTQIA, I don't know if that's just being a smart aleck or it's somebody just having no clue about how to spell a word. Energy. Kink. How does the word kink come from LGBTQIA? Okay, well, I'm glad that this has been anonymous because otherwise those who are writing kink and economics and energy or climate, you're really exposing yourself for the lack of spelling. And I don't think this is a conversation that you all should be part of. This is a conversation that's intended for a very serious audience. And if you do not wish to be part of this conversation, then you are most welcome to either stay quiet or not participate or leave. So happy to have that that taken out of the equation here. Anyway, let's move to the next. What are some of the beliefs or stereotypes you have about queer or LGBT people? Now, this is an open-ended question. Please feel free to have an honest expression of what are the beliefs or stereotypes you have about queer and LGBTQ people. What are the stereotypes? Do you think that LGBTQ people, they look a certain way? Lesbians always dress up like men? Remember, this is anonymous. I can't see who you are. I can't see your responses. And I'm expecting you to have an honest conversation on this platform. Everyone else can choose to stay quiet, not participate, or leave. They are just like any of us. Okay. I don't have any. Interesting. In a gay couple, one partner is feminine, although now I have learned it's not true always. I don't have any. So several of you are saying I don't have any. I feel ashamed of my past beliefs. I don't think you should feel ashamed. I mean, that is a process of growing up, and that is a process of education. You're here in this conversation. You're here at CCS Baithak. It's a moment of great pride that you should feel that you are investing in your growth. You're investing in self-development. That is a contribution of self-esteem. So please have self-esteem. Don't think bad about yourself. Okay. None, nothing as such. Their sexual choices, partners, or their entire personality. I don't have any stereotypes related to LGBTQ community. No stereotypes. They're just confused, have mistaken some incident, or simply just a face or a person. They're often bullied. So everyone is pointing out, not everyone, but a lot of you are saying that society has certain stereotypes, but mostly you don't have them. I don't have any stereotypes. I believe everyone is human. Okay. Very good. We're at 22 responses. I'll wait for 25. I'll wait for touching the halfway mark, and then we'll proceed to the next slide. This is a good one. I've seen transgendered people dress in a certain way, badai mangna, and like recently I saw one trying to ask for badai as a certain sum of money. Quite adamantly. Okay. I'll move to the next slide. The reason I wanted to bring out some of these stereotypes is I'm hoping that you really question deep within yourself and put it out there very honestly, because as I said, it's anonymous. Because this journey of growth and learning begins only when you're honest with yourself about what beliefs you really have, right? What are the assumptions you have? And they may not be politically correct, and therefore you may never ever say this in public in front of others, but here you can, because this is confidential, it's anonymous. I don't know who you are if you say it. And then maybe there can be a conversation where we can discuss it. Okay, so I will move to the next slide. I think we've captured pretty much all the stereotypes and myths that most of you have. It tends to do with feminine expression, tends to do with clothing, all which you think society holds, but not you. Very nice. Okay. Next slide. How many of you people think that straight heterosexual people can be queer? Yes, no, I don't know. So out of 20 responses, 11 of you have said don't know. 21 responses now. Okay, we're reaching the halfway mark. Now it's interesting that from the previous slide, where most of you said you don't have any stereotypes, a lot of the ones who responded said you don't have any stereotypes. If you said that in the previous slide, and now in this slide, most of you are saying, I don't know, then what are the stereotypes you think you have about queer people that you think straight people may or may not have it? Ask yourself, why are you on the fence, not sure that straight people can be queer? Doesn't it imply that you either have some vision of what a straight person is and a vision of what a queer person is? And a lot of you are not sure that they can be the same. There are three of you who says, there are three of you says no directly. So you're pretty sure that straight people cannot be queer. So we have some sense, it seems, that we have some sense of what a straight person is supposed to be like or look like, and what a queer person is supposed to be like or look like. And that's being reflected in some of the responses here. Do you think you are queer? Again, anonymous, confidential responses, even I can't see it. Menti.com doesn't record responses. It's not attached to any ID. You have not signed in. So feel free to openly say, do you think you are queer? So a lot of you are saying, no, you are not queer. For a lot of you who are very confidently saying you are not queer, one, I feel very unfortunate for you, because it is not that you are not queer. It is that you do not know that you are queer. Every single person is queer. Every single person. And what do I mean by that? See, this is where we need to have a very honest conversation with ourselves. It begins with you. As I said, when I was born and when I was in the early second standard, I already knew who I was attracted to. And maybe you were attracted to the opposite sex, but that is not all that it means to be queer. When you grew up, you started forming, you started fitting, you started wearing certain kinds of clothes. All of that is the way in which you suppressed your queerness. So yes, straight people can be queer. Yes, every one of you is queer. And then you begin to adopt a personality that society gives you or that your friends give you. And it's called peer pressure. It's called tradition. It's called culture. It's called being part of society and fitting in. And there are many ways, and I'm not only just talking about who you're attracted to or how do you what clothes you wear. Being queer can also be about the kind of thoughts you have. For example, I don't know how many men are in this audience, but the fact that even if you are a heterosexual male, that you could enjoy the pleasures that gay people experience even with your physical body as a straight man with another woman or with someone of the opposite sex or some other person of another gender, that is an idea that is queer. It is an idea that transgresses the normativity of sex that we are being taught, right? So the idea that you can enjoy your bodies in ways different from the way you are taught is also a queer idea. So ideas can be queer. You owning those ideas, living through those ideas can make you queer. You exhibiting those ideas in your behavior, in your mannerisms, in your fashion, in your outlook of life can be queer. So queer used to be a word that was a word of insult. This person is queer, that person is weird, that person is off the mainstream. But you know what? Gay people, LGBTQ people, we owned this word because we knew what it meant to be different from society. So we have appropriated that word for ourselves. So queer now has become a badge of honor. So I actually feel very sad and sorry for those people who don't think that they are queer, because they're literally just using secondhand copies of a personality that society has given them, that they have forgotten what the original person that they are or they could be, that could have been possible, has been lost. That person that could have flourished in a very unique sense of individuality has been lost. So this conversation is one of radical individualism and radical freedom. When you say you're not queer, you are putting yourself in a prison. And that's an unfortunate thing to do to yourself, I think. We'll move to the next slide. Man or woman is a reference to a person's gender expression, gender identity, or sex. Okay, we've reached 26 responses. So yes, most of you have got this correct, gender identity. The way we differentiate gender identity from gender expression and sex is that sex refers to the biological foundation of you as a physical entity on this planet, right? So we all believe we are physical entities. None of us are souls. We are not atmas, right? Unless you think of yourself as that way, but no. We are all physical entities and we inhabit a body. We inherit a body, we inhabit that body, right? Now that body has certain physical, biological foundation. We identify the sex to that foundation. Now, typically the markers of that foundation, that physical, the markers of that are whether your body produces sperms or whether your body produces eggs. So typically, if your body produces sperms, you're considered to be male. If your body produces eggs, your body is considered to be female. There are a lot of species in the animal kingdom and in the plant kingdom that have asexual reproduction, which means they have both male and female reproductive organs within the same physical entity. But mostly among humans, it is considered to be male and female as separate bodies. However, there are certain human beings, there are certain people who are born intersexed, or who are born with both abilities. And oftentimes at birth, the doctor and the parent usually make a decision to assign a sex to the person. So sex has biological indicators or markers associated with it. So whether you're a sperm producing body or whether you're an egg producing body, just because you have high levels of testosterone doesn't make you male. Likewise, just because you have high levels of estrogen doesn't make you female. We know of a lot of women who have high testosterone. A lot of men also go around injecting testosterone and they get high. Some of them have low, and likewise with women. So testosterone is not a marker. Neither is chromosomes, because as I said, intersex people can have multiple pairs of chromosomes. So for example, instead of having an XX and an XY chromosome, which is typically what the 23 pairs are made of, you can also have an XXY. So there are human beings, few of them, even though they are a small number, they do exist, and they are part of the spectrum of how human bodies are diverse. So that's the conversation about sex. When you come to gender, the conversation of gender is, how do I take this body and feel or live in it? How do I feel about this body? So you can be somebody who feels that, okay, this is my body and I like it, and I'm going to navigate the world with it, in alignment with it. So then you're called cisgendered. And sometimes you don't like the body, your brain doesn't fit in with the body, the brain chemicals are not in consonance or in alignment with the body that you are born in. And those are the people who feel that they have a dysphoria. A dysphoria is a form of a psychological disconnect. And so a lot of times they want to transition to another gender. They want to go to a gender that they feel more comfortable in. So you can be a male-bodied transgendered woman, which means you were born in a body that has biological markers of a male, but your brain chemistry, your hormonal chemistry are not in alignment with this body. And therefore you wish to transition to being a woman. So woman is the gender identity. Male is a biological sex marker. Likewise with man. So man and female, right? So you may be female bodied transitioning towards being a man, a transgendered man. So that's how identity differs from biology. Finally, we have gender expression. Gender expression is when I present myself to the world as a certain gender. Now, you can present yourself to the world in many ways. You can present yourself to the world as a man, as a woman, as neither, and as both. For example, throughout our history, especially in India, you know very well, our Indian history and philosophy and mythology is full of stories of how you have a male god or a man transitioning and becoming and presenting a female, or there is different ways in which a god presents themselves. So for example, a very famous photograph of the Krishna, there's a statue of the Krishna. He's standing in a tribhanga pose. He's standing in a very tri-bent pose, which is very feminine, and he's got plaited hair. And that statue or that form of his is called the complete man, the Purna Purush. So we have had stories in our history of complete transitioning across genders and complete transitioning across identities. We've never had the issue of, oh, if you're a man, then you have to present as a man. If you're a woman, you have to present as a woman, being masculine or being feminine. We did not have that until very recently. So until the past couple of 100 years, 200-300 years. So we have to understand that gender and gender identity are two different things. I'm sorry, gender expression are two different things. The way you feel and the way you show yourself to the world are two different things. The way you show yourself to the world is where the conversation of liberation has to happen. The way you show yourself to the world is where liberty and individualism has a big role to play. Your culture defines how much they control you, and your individualism or your self-esteem or your dignity will define or determine how much open and expressive you get to be. So gender expression is a conversation of liberty, individualism, and culture. Gender identity is a conversation about the self, about your own mind, your introspection, your own sense of your body. Now, given this conversation, we'll move to the next slide. Tell me about this. Can a man get pregnant? Given whatever we had this conversation, and if you've been paying attention, so I'm going to reach the 25 mark and then we'll proceed with the conversation. We have 23 people who have responded so far. Can a man get pregnant? So it's interesting that 18 of you said yes, and I'm sure the ones who said no, the 4 of you and the 3 of you who said don't know, are either very confused about what's going on, or are we talking about the same terms? And here's the thing. As we discussed just a few minutes ago in the previous slide, man is the gender identity on a biological foundation that could be either male or female, right? So just because the majority of people you have met in your life are biologically also female and are also women, does not mean that there are few people on this earth and on this planet in reality that are biologically female but are men. And what do I mean by that? Those are biological women, biological females who wish to transition or who have transitioned to being a man. So if you are biologically female and you still have, your preoperative, and you still have the biological foundations of being a female, your gender identity is man, and you wish to be a man, you wish to be recognized as a man, and you wish to navigate this world as a male. So you can be pregnant, technically speaking, right? Scientifically speaking. Why is this an important point to make in terms of this nuance? Because when you are in the medical field or when you are a doctor, sometimes a lot of these issues about your body and the way it reacts to medicines or the surgical interventions that are required come down to your body and how your body will react to the treatments you are given, right? So these are conversations about life and death for a lot of us. And just because we, the LGBTQ people, are part of the minority and not the majority, does not mean that our conversations about science and our bodies are irrelevant. And I'll draw a parallel to what this means. Back in the 1980s, most people thought HIV was a gay disease. HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, was a gay disease, and that it afflicted only gay men, AIDS. So the government, the political system around the time, and the scientific community around the time did not bother investing too much science and too much research and too much of budgets to the study of HIV as a disease. Why? Because it's a minority thing. It's only for those gay men, those people, those minorities out there, a few of them who go around, spreading it to each other. And as a result of it, HIV was allowed to explode into this global, almost an epidemic, pandemic scale. And now it affects everybody, right? It can affect anyone, right? Had we invested the amount of research and the amount of time into it early enough, perhaps we would have been far long down the road to treatment or the road to prevention, either through a vaccine or through a cure. But here we are. After all of these 40, 50 years, we've lost lives. Many LGBTQ members have lost lives and succumbed to HIV. And a lot of even heterosexual community have lost their lives and succumbed to HIV. So the conversation is that the bodies that we inhabit play a role in the way in which we think about health and we think about life. And for you to be able to, for you to negate that, to invalidate that, to invisibilize that conversation is a life and death issue for a lot of the LGBTQ community. So the conversation here is not about pronouns, and it is not about, what is the language I should use? Is it about man? Is it about woman? It is about understanding that this world is so diverse. Just because we have certain assumptions about what a man is, does not mean that that is the case 100% of the time for everybody. So just because we go through the world only feeling like this is how we are and this is how everyone else is also like us, does not mean that our reality is the same as the same reality for everyone else. So this is also a conversation where you have to ask yourself, what are the assumptions I make about the other? Not just about yourself. I mean, one is you have to emancipate your own self. What are the conversations you've inherited about yourself? What are the stories you've put on yourself? What are the kind of ideas about clothing, ideas about style, ideas about relationships, whether it is monogamy, polyamory, whether it is to do with, just being married forever and having, a closed relationship, open relationship. All of these conversations are about the self. Then there is a conversation about the other. How do we understand the other as different from us? and not the same as us. That is the conversation of emancipation. So given these various inputs that you all have given me, now I want to come back to us and I want to stop sharing my screen. I want to have a conversation now with some of you raising your hands and telling me, have you changed from your first response that I had certain assumptions, or I did not have certain assumptions, I did not have certain beliefs or stereotypes, but now I've discovered that I have. Has there been any journey of an eye-opening experience that I did not think I held these beliefs, but now I realize I did? Yes, Dhruv.
Hi, Jerry. Yeah, so I think personally for me, and based on a lot of questions, um, it's not so much so that I had assumptions, but perhaps there was a lot of opening up, in the sense, a lot of exposure to a lot of things that I didn't really know. And I think a lot of that changed by the time we got to the last questions, because I know that I've been able to change my responses from what I had always or earlier been thinking. So I think, yeah, it has been really um, enlightening in a lot of aspects.
Thank you, Dhruv, for coming up with that. But more specifically, I encourage anyone else, specifically, I had this belief and this stereotype. Now I realize that that was wrong. Because many of your answers were contradictory in various of those questions and slides. So there is definitely a conversation to be had. Yes, Tamina.
Thank you for recognizing, sir. So, firstly, I guess I would side with the latter part because I didn't hold any beliefs or stereotype. But I believe after going through that quiz, I did discover that I had been a passive recipient of those beliefs and stereotypes that were ingrained in me. So I guess I was able to break through out of them and realize that even though they had been deeply layered, those were there, and I should be more actively try to be critical enough to accept it or not.
Thank you, Tamina, for that comment. Definitely, yes, be critical about the ideas and beliefs you hold. See, I want all of you also to understand one thing. We are human beings that require stories. What do I mean by stories, right? We have an understanding of the world, and that understanding is a aspect of our culture and our education. What our parents teach us, what our religious leaders teach us, what our teachers teach us. By teachers I mean school teachers teach us. So all of these play a role in how you understand this planet, understand this world. And you must understand that your story does not equal to everybody's story. Okay, that's a very crucial understanding. Your story is unique to your upbringing, your culture, your time. So if you were born in 1997, the stories you heard are very different from if you were born like, like thousands of years ago, like me. So the stories you hear depend on the time in which you were born and the time in which you are alive. The geography, your location, not just culture. I don't only mean culture. What I also mean is the geography. If you were born in a desert country where everything is sand and everything is desert, what are you looking at? You're looking at stars and the moon because those are the biggest, brightest things in the sky. And therefore you create full religions around the stars and the moon, full systems of thought, full ideas around the stars and the moon, the lunar calendar. But if you are born in a geography of greenery and abundance and lush farms and fields and mountains, what are the kind of ideas you will create? What is the kind of culture you will create? Agricultural societies that do not travel, they settle, right? Not nomadic cultures, but cultures that sit and settle. And when you settle, what do? You put gravestones, because I lived here. That's a gravestone, right? You create boundaries, property. You say, this is my house, right? You establish property rights. So there is so much about where you are born, the geography of your location, the time of your existence on this planet, and the immediate surrounding that you are in, your teachers, your parents, your immediate culture, that shapes the stories you are born in and the stories that you believe. So for example, I was born in a Christian family, right? So I was born in a Catholic, South Indian Catholic conservative family. What did I grow up believing? That God is male, God is white, and God is very old. He's like an old man, right? I believed these three things. Then, as a consequence of that, I believed that God made man and woman. They were called Adam and Eve. This is what I inherited. So now, when you have only Adam and Eve, when you have only man and woman, when you have only heterosexuality, when you have only straight, when you have only cisgendered, when you have only monogamy, what are the kind of beliefs, assumptions, and stereotypes I will have about myself being gay, somebody else being trans, a third person not being in a relationship or not being in a monogamous relationship, right? So there are so many layers to this conversation that depends on what story I was told by my parents, by my religious leaders, by people in authority. But if I was not born in a Christian family, assume I was born in, a Jain family. Now, Jains also have a lot of beliefs, but one of the core beliefs of Jainism is multiplicity of truths, anekantavada. So this is all things that you will find in this book of mine. Anekantavada means there are many, many subjective truths, many ways. Many of you may have heard the story of the blind men touching an elephant, and all the six blind men touch an elephant, and one feels a rope, one feels, the leg of the elephant as a tree trunk, one feels that is a pipe, one feels it's a fan. So they say the elephant is a fan. They say the elephant is like a rope. They say the elephant is like a tree trunk. And Jainism, this parable comes from Jainism. And Jainism points out that all of these are grasping at truths, but are only one side of the truth. So the story that you were told when you were a child is only one side of reality and complexity. And that there is so much more for you to discover about yourself and about the other. And the moment you say that the elephant equals the rope, you have said that the whole equals only your story. You're saying everything means straight. And in the bargain, what you're doing is not only revealing your foolishness, but also actually imprisoning your own self. Think about it, how much more fabulous and free you could be and live freely if you did not have your culture, your tradition, your parents, your religious leaders defining your truths for you. This is the caste you're supposed to marry into. This is the body that you have, and this is how you should act. Your hands should not move around so much if you're a male. You shouldn't cry or tear up if you are a man, right? Imagine if you didn't believe in any of that. Imagine the world also didn't believe in any of that. Imagine if we liberated ourselves from this understanding of Adam and Eve, straight, heterosexual, one way to be, one way to live. Why do we have these stories? See, they were stories that belonged in a certain time and an age. As I said, it came from a certain region. But we are a different region. We are in a different time. We are different human beings. Why have we still taken those same stories as our own? Right? So earlier, the conversation Shivani was having about feminism. Find your own way to be liberated. Does it have to be called feminism? Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter. Find your own way to treat each other with compassion and allow them to be free. Push them towards freedom. This is the radical conversation of individualism and liberty. That the journey of liberty begins with the journey of freeing yourself. I'll take you through a very brief PPT slide that I made on the conversation we're talking about. unless there's anyone else who wants to raise a hand and participate in a conversation, ask a question. Shivani Sehgal has raised her hand. Yes, please go ahead.
I just want to take a moment to appreciate because uh, the earlier all the things that you have taught us today, that is something I never thought of yet. But most importantly, the way you said that it doesn't have to be a word, it doesn't have to be something so confined, and maybe that is the reason why people choose to, you know, fight against the right things. कि ऐसा क्यों हमारे साथ ही? Because they are not free. So I think now I know I can, actually liberate them by communicating, that you just have to take it easy. It's nothing that you're not getting oppressed or anything. It's just about liberating an oppressed community. That is all it is. So it was enlightening. And I also realized certain things which happened in my family, like with my brother. So that is one thing, now I think I'll be aware about, and I can actually literally, apply it with new people I meet. So yeah.
Thank you so much for that generous comment, Shivani, for the kind words you are sharing about this session. I want to, I mean, if there's no one else who's raising a hand and saying anything, I just want to give you a very visual depiction of what difference and diversity can mean and what are the kind of stories we're allowing ourselves to accept as our narrative. So I just want to share my screen. How do I, one second, I'm struggling to find that share. Oh, here it is. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay. See, remember I said that I was born in a Christian family, South Indian, conservative, Christian, believing, strong family. And for us, God looked male, old, with beard. And, obviously his son also was like male, Jesus Christ, and white. For some reason, they didn't seem to have dark-skinned gods for India or for Indian Christians. Unlike now, more recently, now they're adapting Jesus to make him look dark-skinned. But imagine if I was not born with that story. Look at this image. This image is something that I would have been born and raised looking at. And maybe I would have had a very different psychological relationship with myself. For a lot of my teenage years, the psychological relationship I had with myself was one of guilt and shame. Because I didn't stand like this way. And I was told I shouldn't stand this way. But look at this form and look at this posture. Look at the grace that we used to have. And we used to celebrate. This is not a feminine figure. This is a masculine figure. It's a male figure. And it's also a half and half figure. Now, if you look at my next slide, if it will move. Again, look at these figures. This is what I was talking about, the complete man. There is a statue here in one of the museums where we have the statue of the Krishna adorned with all this jewelry and adorned with all this garland and flowers and in the most celebrated form, standing in this tribend posture. And he's called the complete man. But look at some of the modern imagery now coming out. These are the modern imagery that is coming out over the past, say, I don't want to say 7 years exactly and give you a lot of hints, but I would say coming out more recently in the past few years. Masculine gods, right? Masculine forms. Ganesha used to be a nice rotund god who used to be very endearing and had a big belly, but now he's got pectoral muscles and he's got biceps and he's got abs. So this is a form and imagery we are now taking. We are adopting the idea that a male should look masculine. And there is only one way to look masculine. And that masculine form is the way in which we were taught by a certain story. a certain story that is alien from our land, but we have embraced it and inherited it wholeheartedly. We look like this though. We don't look like this. We look like this. Most of us look like this. Different, diverse, unique. And this is a very nice insight from Carl Jung. I like this quote quite a lot. Everything that irritates us about the other, everything that irritates us about queer people, transgender people, ye kya kaise log hai, they irritate you. If you really investigate why they irritate you, it will lead to a deeper understanding of yourself. Everything that irritates you about the other can lead to a deeper understanding of yourself. Because we all exist in a tension with each other. This is a very famous photograph. It's actually a performance art installation by Marina Abramovic, very good artist and someone that I really, really like. This, what they're trying to tell you is that society is always in tension. You either come this way or you come that way. Always in conflict. Always trying to say that this is how you have to be. And civilization is a group of people stuck in tension. Therefore, the moment you come out of civilization, you are called a jungli. Going to the jungles, coming out of the grid is considered to be a hermit, jungli. And what is our definition and ideas of a jungli or a hippie or a hermit? Unbathed, unclean, inappropriate clothing, all of that. This is a civilization of tension. But we can move away from it and look at the world through a queer gaze, each of us, all of us. And we no longer have to be in tension, because me being more of me doesn't have to mean less of you. And you being more of you, however you want it to be, doesn't have to mean less of me. So I think if we emancipate ourselves from this tension of identity and expression and how we should behave and who should say what and how they should act and who they should love, then I think we'll all be far more free to enjoy our bodies and enjoy the society. Now, this is the conversation about self-introspection and psychology. How do we move from this conversation to one of policy, right? So I think that is something that is some of the questions that have come in. So if we want to move to that conversation, we can do that. I think some of those questions are in some Slido. Dhruv or Saurabh, you would be asking me those questions.
Yeah, Jerry. So just a second, Jerry. Let me. So the majority of questions are on the same wavelength. So I'll just sum them up as one. It's essentially what are the important factors to take into account for policy development and implementation to ensure that all genders are treated equally as such, right? Or to ensure that there's gender and sexual equity taken into account in the policy making process?
So I want to ask a reverse question. Whoever asks that question, maybe please feel free to respond, or anyone else also can respond. When I make a gendered bathroom, say male bathroom, female bathroom, for men to go and women to go, am I being exclusionary or inclusionary? Please raise your hand and answer. Very simple question. Yes, Tamina.
So the first one.
You're being exclusionary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough. So that's one response I got. Anusha also says exclusionary. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question in a different way. When I create a non-gendered bathroom, so I create a bunch of cubicles and restrooms, but for everybody and anybody to go in, am I creating an unsafe space for women? Because it is a space that even men can come in, including trans men. So I've created a washroom, or I've created a locker room, and the policy is these locker rooms are non-gendered, so anybody can come in and anybody can go out. So do women feel unsafe? Have I created an unsafe space or an inclusive space? Again, Tamina, your hand is raised, and then Anuj Thakur has said an unsafe space. Yes, first we'll start with Tamina, since you raised your hand and you've been very participative. Go ahead. Tamina?
Jerry, I think it might have been an old hand for her. She did.
Oh, okay. Dia, your hand is raised.
Yeah, so if it is in the context of India, then it's unsafe. But if it's in the context of the world, then it is an inclusive space.
But why Indian trans men are not allowed to use women's or ungendered
In
spaces?
India, the problem is that most of the men are half-witted and they have not like a complete knowledge about the safety of a woman. So even if we give them the space of a common room, they would try to group the girls. So it's not just restroom, but women are unsafe literally everywhere.
Okay, so I don't know that kind of a judgment on Anuj Thakur and Dhruv and sorry, all of you and me, we're all unwitted men, Indian men. Yeah, I'm just pulling your leg, no worries. But see, a lot of people are saying unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. Sudeshna, I disagree. I want Sudeshna's voice to be heard. Can I hear Sudeshna, please?
Yeah, hi Jerry. Thank you. Firstly, I must thank you. It's been such a fantastic session. I've been enjoying listening to your perspectives. So, Jerry, my thought is that you're definitely not creating an unsafe space because by that logic, airplanes have all these common bathrooms. They are actually the most inclusive ones. And by what standard? Somebody choosing to assault a woman in a washroom is a personal choice that that person is making. That's got nothing to do with his gender or the way he or she is made. So, that cannot be the judging yardstick for calling a space safe or unsafe. And there is a different norm for India or a different norm for a different country. I think people need to be more aware and educated, and that's going to change the whole situation.
Good. I mean, Sudeshna, I think your points are very excellent, very thought-provoking, and I don't know if the others, everyone who says unsafe and unsafe, have changed their minds based on what you said. However, I would also like to point out that just because we have a conversation here about this space being unsafe or this place being inclusive does not mean we always have to have the answers. I think the bigger conversation is that we have to protect ourselves from the impulse to rush to a conclusion. So as you, Sudeshna, disagree with the others here, like Dia, who said they feel it is an unsafe space, likewise, this is an example of diverse viewpoints and diversity coming to play in policy making and in policy decisions. So what is the answer to how a person should make policies? As minimally intrusive as possible, as minimally universalized as possible. The way to deal with diverse, complex issues, such as disagreements among many of you here, is for me to not decide on your behalf for everybody. So I'll step back and I'll tell you, there are 3 ways to deal with diversity. 1, if I think you're bad and different or whatever, and I disagree with you, or you're just a weird person, I can dominate you, control you. So that's domination, control, force down. The other is I can ignore you and avoid you. Okay, so I kind of push you aside, I completely ignore you, I invisibilize you. So dominate and control, invisibilize, push and suppress, or I can negotiate with you. I can engage in a conversation with you. These are the only 3 ways to deal with diversity, right? So one is violent, one is suppressive. I mean, in a way, both are violent. And finally, one is dialogue or negotiation. And in a negotiation, it is a very complex conversation because you may not like what someone else wants, and they may not agree to what you want. And this is the dance of democracy. So in a political space, democracy is how you deal with diversity. In an economic space, the trade and the freedom of property right owners to trade with whomever they want and whom they don't want is the way you deal with diversity and complexity. In the interpersonal social space, this is the way by free speech, by having conversations, by having debates is the way you deal with diversity and complexity. Any other method is one of domination, subjugation, and repression. So the moment you bring a gun, you are violent. The moment you pass a law that bans, you are violent. The moment you pass a law that says this is the only way, my way or the highway, it is the only space you can have, you are being violent. So I don't want to rush to a conversation saying that gendered bathrooms are inclusive or gendered bathrooms are unsafe. Let's have a conversation about gendered bathrooms where, as Sudeshna said, gendered bathrooms in an airport have a different context. As Dia said, gendered bathrooms may be in a hostel scenario or a college scenario where hormones are raging and there are young teenagers roaming around, may be different. And then there are inclusive spaces in certain other contexts that may be right. So should we have one policy that fits all? So we've not taken into account context, we've not taken into account history, we've not taken into account geography, we've not taken into account time, we've not taken into account who, audience, and we decided that we have to rush to a conclusion that gendered bathroom is either unsafe or inclusive. Anyone has any thoughts on that, on this conversation? So the liberal approach or the way in which you deal with diversity, the liberal approach to dealing with diversity is that you take a step back and you do not universalize. As much as possible, you engage with the stakeholders with whom you wish to have certain policies. So what is the issue with the NALSA judgment, for example, and what is the issue with the transgender bills that are being passed? The trans people are not involved in the conversation. They are completely excluded. In the rush to make laws, you are making laws without having the input of the stakeholders who will be impacted. For example, when Section 377 was still on the law, on the books, I mean, it still is, but when it applied to adults as well, consenting adults, the court was passing judgment after judgment without having a conversation with us. The Supreme Court, in upholding the 377 prior to reading it down, said that it is such a minuscule minority, we don't need to worry about them. I mean, they're so minuscule, their lives, their heartbreak, their harassment or their struggles is so minuscule, it's not going to bother the majority of us, and it shouldn't. And this is where democracy fails, right? Where you are unable to take into consideration the most minority voices of your country. And in any conversation, we are always, all of us are a minority of one. We all are minorities in various different ways. I'm sure you all know what intersectionality means, intersectional identities, and how our intersectional identities play a role in the way in which we navigate this world. If you really take it down to its logical conclusion, we all are so unique. We all go through oppression in different levels. And we all go through certain forms of exclusion. So the conversation was at a policy level is also not one, of what should work, but it is about how much more compassionate can we be. Because you will not be able to include everybody. When you're making policies, you will not be able to include everybody. But can your policies be compassionate to the most and bring them into the conversation without us rushing to a judgment or rushing to a conclusion about where we want to be? So democracy is messy, policy making is messy, it is complex, but all good things in life are complex, like human beings. All good things in life is complex. Relationships are complex, emotions are complex. Everything simple is very boring. So to flatten the complexity of human life and the human condition to something easy, to some quick solutions and to quick judgments, is actually to really minimize the beauty of life and minimize your experience of a beautiful life. As I said earlier, for a straight man to only think that sex is performed in only this way is really to minimize and have a very impoverished understanding of what his body is capable of. Likewise with women, and likewise with policy, and likewise with the entire human condition. So be comfortable dealing with complexity, be comfortable dealing with diversity. Don't think masculine has to look like this, Don't think feminine has to look like this and just end the conversation there. Don't do that. Pranav, thank you very much. Shivani Segal, how will you bring violent people to negotiate? No, you can't bring violent people to negotiate because violent people are there to kill you and suppress you or silence you. So therefore, you have to engender a society that doesn't rush to violence. That happens through education at very young age. That happens through culture and propaganda. You have to engender a culture that goes towards conversation and negotiation rather than rushes to violence. And violence can take the form of many ways. It can be the form of banning and censorship, or it can be literally the gun on your head, right? So domination, suppression, banning, right? So every time you pass a law that says, okay, these kinds of lives shouldn't be seen on the screen, what you've done is you've invisibilized and invalidated a whole kind of community. And some trans child who perhaps would have looked at that screen and looked at that movie and realized that there is a different way to live and that they are completely normal in the normal sense of human diversity, that child is denied that opportunity to have have that experience of being normal. So you don't know what kind of impact you will have on diversity when you choose to universalize your story. As I said, when you think that all people are supposed to be Adam and Eve and are supposed to have sex with each other in the opposite sex, you have universalized a Judeo-Christian story. Yes, Dia, and then I'll go to the chat question.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Because
I
I
can
was
hear
not
you.
able.
Yes,
Right.
I can hear you, Dia.
So, don't you think the picture that you just withdrew was a very realist point of view of policy making? Because we are anyways encircled with people who are violent and suppressive of the minorities, and I'm not talking just about the LGBTQI community, but also women and lower caste people or backward class people. So it anyways brings a very realist point of you're bringing a very realist point of view, a very idealist point of view, and not very realist in nature. So how do you think you can make a change in the policy? Because even if I bring in the topic of NEP, which is the recent one of education, there's just one single page that talks about LGBTQI inclusivity, and it's a big policy if we see. So how do you think we can make it more practical in nature?
Well, step one, you have to start believing that inclusivity is not idealism and that exclusion is not realistic. So let me put it in another way. You can get from point A to point B very quickly if you have only one highway, right? One highway, quickly you can get from point A to point B. But if you do that, if you create a highway like an autobahn, or you create a what is that, interstate highways in America, right? Very big, very smooth, amazing roads, very nicely, efficiently, and speedily you can get from point A to point B. But what you have done in the process is you've banned bicyclists from using the highway. You've banned pedestrians from using that road. You've banned bullock carts and other poor people without vehicles, without four-wheelers or without 16-wheelers from using that road. You have excluded a lot of people and you have invested public tax money, everybody's money, in building a road that can be used only by a few because you believe efficiency is more important than inclusion or diversity. So while a highway is realistic, so is another kind of a road, right? So India is full of roads where everybody is included. India is full of traffic jams. So yes, you can look at our roads as full of traffic jams and chaos, but you can also look at it as, well, this is the price you're paying for diversity. Everybody's on it. Everybody's using it. So the tax money or the money that you have taken to build that road, to put that asphalt on the road, to put that cement on the road, you have used that money to allow everybody access to it. The bullock cart person, the pedestrian, the two-wheeler, the cyclist, the four-wheeler, the 16-wheeler, everybody's using it. Yes, the cost of it is you get inefficiency, you get traffic jams, you get chaos, but you have included. So it is not idealistic to think that inclusion is idealistic and not possible. It is choices that you are making. Remember, do not push inclusion and diversity as idealism, you are making a choice in this matter. To tolerate and to accept and to love even the minority of a single one intersexed person is a choice you have to make. It's a choice. Don't say that, oh, the majority of 51% of us are this way, 70% of us are this way, only 2% minuscule minority are that way. So therefore we don't need to bother. To include them is idealistic. No, it is not. Inclusion is not an idealistic thing. It is a choice you as a policy maker is choosing to make. And you could very well make another choice. You could very well insist that our roads are inclusive, that our schools are inclusive, that our educational curriculum are inclusive, that our understanding of gender is inclusive, that our understanding of what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man is inclusive. You don't have to say that this is idealistic. It's very realistic. It's about the choices you choose to make. You can choose an efficient choice, which takes you efficiently from point A to point B, like China, and make everybody nice and same and equal. But what about freedom in China? You don't get freedom, right? So you'll get a nice big city with shining towers, but I don't know how much you can speak openly inside those buildings, right? Or you could have a messy and chaotic democracy or a messy and chaotic society, but which still allows you to speak. The moment you suppress that diversity, that complexity, that inconvenience of other people's ideas, you are creating an efficient society, but only yours, in the way in which you think is efficient and in the way in which you think is realistic. Would you say that we as a society, Dhruv's question, would you say that we as a society to an extent are failing kids because we are not educating them perhaps at a younger age in schools or even at homes? We are failing not just our kids, we are failing ourselves, Dhruv. Just because we are adults does not mean we know any two hoots about how to live with the integrity of what it means to be a human being, with the passion of what it means to be a human being. We, all of us are living in contorted selves, including me. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm the most liberated person on this planet. No, every one of us is living in contorted forms. Our conversation here is about let's heal ourselves, let's liberate ourselves, and then we'll be able to allow our kids and the next generation and people around us to also heal and to also be liberated and be free. Because this mindset will reflect in our policies. See, you have the Middle East and you have Saudi Arabia, they have certain policies. They will think Shivani and, no, sorry, not Shivani. They will think that Dia's points are very idealistic. Because in their culture, the policies they want are more realistic. So the kind of culture you have is a outcome of the kind of mindset you have. And the kind of mindset you have is an outcome of the kind of journey of discovery you have allowed yourself to go through. This journey of discovery, this thought, this mindset, this culture will lead to the kind of policies and the kind of country you build. In one of my slides, I showed you how images of our gods changed in the past few years. When we used to have very soft imagery of gods and we had, a very different feminine form, suddenly they've started changing. Why they started changing? Because we wanted to be considered to be a masculine country. We want to be more powerful. We want to have strong leaders. What do we mean by strong leaders? Only that kind which we got. So our conversation about strong leadership, masculine country, aggressiveness has reflected in the kind of art we are producing, right? So this is not a conversation about idealism versus realism. It is about choices we are making.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Jerry, this one final question slide. It's a small question about what, according to you, could be the steps taken by students and administration to promote gender and sexual equality in educational institutions.
Yeah,
if you had some thoughts for apart.
Yes, I think one, definitely remove the shame and guilt about conversations about the self. Remove the shame and guilt about the conversations about sex and the body. Learn to understand that this body in all of its vulnerability and in all of its weirdness and some flab is falling there and some, disproportion there and some freckles and, whatever stains and marks over there are all part of how you are going to navigate this world. There is no other way. So let's have an open conversation about the bodies we inhabit. So remove the shame, stigma, and guilt about the bodies we inhabit. Have an open conversation with children about sex. It does not have to be full of shame. It does not have to be full of weirdness. Because the more healthy relationship you build with your body, because that's really where it all begins. Your psychology navigates through your body. Your mind is formed, and your ideas about yourself is formed through the body that you use. And as a child, you are absorbing how other people are reacting to your body and how other people are reacting to the way in which you are behaving. And as a child, you start absorbing these cues and you start shaping yourself. So let's try and be more mindful about these conversations with ourselves and our bodies and our children. So sex education, yes, have it. How early can you have it? Depends on your relationship with your child, or as a teacher in your relationship with your students. As a policy, what should be the policy around it? As a democracy, come up with a grade or a standard at which you want to have sex education. Is it 18 the right age or 16 the right age? Is 13 the right age when you hit puberty? It's a conversation to be had in a democratic manner as policy makers. So these are conversations you can have on a policy level, but on an individual level, you remove the shame and stigma about it. So when you want to have a child, when you're talking about a child to a child about sex, you can very well talk about it from a biological sense of view. You can talk about it from a psychological sense, or you can talk about it from an emotional sense. Is it about love? Is it about how you want to discover what your body does, or is it about how your body functions? Right? So there are many ways in which you can speak about sex without any kind of moral and ethical issue around it. Like morally, this is wrong. Ethically, you should not act this way, should not show this out to people. All these kinds of conversations are, a choice that you make, and you don't have to have it in a certain way, and you can have it in a very empowering way.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for the conversation and for sharing your time today with us. That essentially brings us to the close of it today. Before I go, Kangan, for the vote of thanks, Jerry, would you have any final closing thoughts for us on this?
No, I don't have any final closing thoughts, but I would like to hear some final closing thoughts from people here. So you can actually just put in a word or two in the chat window, or you can raise your hand and say some final closing thoughts, because I've not had a lot of conversation here, participation here. So I don't know, being on this virtual platform, I don't know if you are really getting any value from this session, or are we completely talking at worlds apart from each other? Because the last thing I want is to end this session without having a sense of that this conversation has been meaningful to you.
I'd encourage at least a few people to either raise their hands and share their thoughts about the thing that what struck them in this session. Or you can even put it in chat.
Give me a word or two in the chat, perhaps, if you don't want to speak up. Somebody's asking me for the book. It's here. It's called I Am Divine, So Are You. It's a very interesting title because it comes from a Hindu, it comes from the Vedas. It comes from this idea that Aham Brahmasmi Tattvamasi. So the idea is that each of us are divinity. We are all divine. But what it really means is not that it's supernatural. It really just means that each of us are worthy of respect. Each of us are worthy of worship. Each of us are worthy of dignity. So when you recognize that you are divine and so is the other, you will begin to offer worship and expect worship. You will be able to offer dignity and respect and expect dignity and respect. So I am divine, so are you. Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, Garima. Thank you, Anand, Preet. Can I get some constructive feedback in terms of what could be improved? Okay, so there's a feedback form.
Yeah, Jerry. I'll collate it and I'll mail it to you. That's not an issue.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right then. I think my task is here done.
Guys, the YouTube link is also there. I'll share the YouTube link of this session with all of you. Right. So even if you want to go back and listen to maybe some part again later, feel free. Great. I'll just end the stream and